Dear students, welcome to UGC EPG Pathashala on Human Rights and Duties. My name is Professor Y.S.R. Murthy. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Human Rights Studies, OP Jindal Global University. In the unit on National Mechanisms for Protection and Enforcement of Human Rights, we will take up today the module on the activities of the National Human Rights Commission. In the earlier modules, we saw the 6 Paris Principles, and we also saw the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. In earlier modules, we have seen the 6 Paris Principles upon which the National Human Rights Commission should be founded, and we have also seen the various provisions of the Protection of Human Rights Act, and in the last module, an introduction to the National Human Rights Commission was given, and in particular, I have explained the complaints handling function. If you see Section 12 of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, it entrusts the Commission with a range of functions, including redressal of individual complaints of human rights violations, intervention in court proceedings involving human rights violations, visits to jails, mental hospitals, or other institutions, and to make recommendations for better protection of human rights there, review laws, constitutional safeguards, or international conventions and make recommendations thereon, undertake or promote research, spread human rights literacy and awareness, encourage the efforts of non-governmental organizations, review the factors which impede the enjoyment of human rights. So, a National Human Rights Commission is supposed to walk on several legs, and in this module, we will take up some of its activities in order to illustrate how the Commission fulfills the various statutory responsibilities which have been given to the Commission. At the end of this module, students will learn about the wide-ranging activities that are within the official mandate of the National Human Rights Commission. And you will also be in a position to understand the nature of activities performed by the Commission under each function mandated by Protection of Human Rights Act 1993 in Section 12. And the students will also be in a position to understand the significant role of the Commission in protection and promotion of human rights in India. And at the end of the module, you will also appreciate the various achievements and challenges. In 1993, the Commission was established for better protection and promotion of human rights in India, and then, as you have seen, Section 12 of the Act provides for a wide-ranging functions. 12A states that the Commission can inquire either suo motu or based on a petition or based on a direction by the court into a violation of human rights committed by a public servant, and also intervention in pending court proceedings before a court of law with its approval if the same involves any allegation as to violation of human rights. The Commission is required to review and report the conditions of jail, mental hospital, or any other institution where persons have been detained or lodged for treatment, protection, and reformation. And the NHRC is required to review and recommend steps for the effective implementation of human rights conventions, and the Commission is required to review various causes like terrorism, poverty, etc., which impede the enjoyment of human rights, and the Commission is also has a statutory responsibility to undertake or promote research in international research in various human rights issues, and it has been taking in pursuance a number of actions. The Commission is also required to spread human rights literacy and awareness among the general public, and NHRC is required to encourage the efforts of non-governmental organizations and other institutions. Now let's look at the complaint redressal in little more detail. A complaint may be made in any language recognized by the Constitution, and once the Commission receives a complaint in an Indian language, it shall on its own get it translated and then take it up for further action. And the complaint can be made by a victim or any other person on his or her behalf, and it can be submitted through post, fax, email, or online. And there is a provision in the NHRC website for submission of complaints, and one can even make urgent complaints either during the working hours or outside the working hours. At the National Human Rights Commission, a facilitation counter called Madad has been set up for providing assistance to the complainants, and the one complainant can track the status of his complaint from the website where there is a provision made for tracking the complaints and what actions have been taken to redress the complaints. When the moment the Commission receives a complaint, it can either dismiss the complaint if it does not fall under its jurisdiction under the Protection of Human Rights Act, or it can dispose the complaint by providing directions to the authorities concerned. The Commission can also transfer the complaint to the concerned State Human Rights Commission to handle it and provide redress, and the Commission can also make other recommendations to the authorities concerned. Now, Section 12B of the Protection of Human Rights Act provides for the intervention of the National Human Rights Commission in a pending court proceeding with the permission of that court. In pursuance of Section 12B, NHRC intervened in several proceedings and which have led to the effective and speedy remedial measures. And here in this module, we will take up some examples of NHRC's intervention in pending court proceedings. For instance, there was a Charanjit Singh. He was a mentally challenged under trial prisoner held in Delhi, and he filed an application before the Delhi, in this case, in response to the conditions of Charanjit Singh, NHRC filed an application before the Delhi High Court seeking quashing of the trial, and the High Court indeed allowed the intervention, and later on asked the NHRC to develop detailed guidelines on how to handle such cases. And in the case, here is a mentally challenged prisoner who has spent over 50 years in prison, and he was never produced before the court since August 1967. And in the case of this mentally ill prisoner held in Assam, the Commission recommended to the government of Assam to release him with immediate effect. And as a result of the intervention by the NHRC, the Supreme Court, in another matter, took cognizance of this case and ordered the government to pay him due compensation of 3 lakh rupees. Now, here is a very, very important case concerning mass cremation in Punjab. Non-governmental organization brought to the attention of the Supreme Court mass cremation of over 2,997 dead bodies which have been cremated as unidentified dead bodies. And Supreme Court ordered an inquiry by the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, into this case. And once it received the CBI report, the Supreme Court referred the matter to the NHRC for adjudication of compensation. And after going through an elaborate process and hearings, the Commission recommended a sum of nearly 26 crores as monetary relief in respect of many persons who have been identified and who have been cremated in an illegal manner. Now, in response to complaints of human rights violations in Bastar district of Chhattisgarh, the NHRC directed its investigation division officers to go across to the state and protect the violation of, redress the violation of human rights. And there was a police hostility against the representatives of civil society, academicians, and journalists, and the reaction of the government also was a cause for concern, and the NHRC therefore directed the Chhattisgarh government to have a provision for training, awareness, and orientation program for the police force, and Commission ordered that clear and separate entry relating to human rights violations shall be made a part of the annual assessment report of civil servants in Chhattisgarh, and 7 human rights protection committees have been directed to be set up in Chhattisgarh. Now let us take up conditions of jail, mental health institutions, or any other institutions. Under Section 12C of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the NHRC has a statutory responsibility to visit prisons and other such institutions where persons are lodged for or detained or lodged for treatment or reformation. And NHRC has been visiting various jails and monitoring the conditions ever since. It has made surprise visits to jails and found that about 70% of the prison deaths are on account of tuberculosis. So based on this empirical evidence, the Commission evolved a pro forma, and then this pro forma or format has been made available to various authorities, and it asks the state governments to conduct a medical examination and report back on the steps to the state government, to the Commission. And all states were asked to check inmates for tuberculosis and take remedial measures. The Commission also visited, among others, the jails in Agra, Muzaffarnagar, Basti, and Meerut, Kanpur, and the number goes on, and these are only a list of illustrative jails, and in each such case, the Commission made detailed recommendations for protection of human rights of inmates held in these jails. In the case of Muktaram Sitaram Shinde versus State of Maharashtra, the Commission was asked to follow the order of the High Court, and then the Commission therefore appointed members who are supposed to work as non-official visitors. And the main problem was in these jails was the overcrowding, especially in states like Chhattisgarh, Dadra Nagar Haveli, Andaman, and where there is a sanctioned capacity, but in practice one finds that there is a overcrowding, and as a result of that, consequent human rights violations. And the Commission also took up the status of mental health institutions in a big manner and had a research study conducted on the quality assurance in mental health. And of course, Agra, in the case of Agra Protective Home, the Supreme Court entrusted the functioning of 3 mental hospitals in Agra, Gwalior, and Ranchi, and Agra Protective Home to the Commission for monitoring. Pursuant to the Supreme Court order, NHRC has been regularly visiting these Agra, Ranchi, Gwalior mental hospitals and as well as the Agra Protective Home to observe the conditions in these institutions on the spot and make recommendations. And the visits made by the Commission's special rapporteurs, the Commission's officials, the Commission's members have led to several positive improvements on the ground. Now let us look at a review of legislative bills and acts from a human rights perspective. The Commission can, under Section 12E of the Protection of Human Rights Act, can review either draft bills or acts which have been enacted by the Parliament, and under this, the Commission reviewed over 35 legislations. They include, among others, the Child Marriage Restraint Act 1929, and in this context of the Child Marriage Restraint Act, the Commission asked the government to reframe some of the provisions to provide for higher penalty and make the offence of child marriage cognizable and non-bailable. And the NHRC also recommended that provision should be included to penalize associations which promote such child marriages. All religious and civil marriages should be registered, which is a far-reaching recommendation, and the NHRC recommended that the contract of marriage shall be made voidable at the option of the minor. Now, what about the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, under which NHRC itself was established? The Commission requested a former Chief Justice of India, Justice Ahmadi, to go into the Act and asked him to suggest a number of recommendations. Based on that, the Commission made a series of suggestions to the government for amendments to the Protection of Human Rights Act. In the case of Freedom of Information Bill, the Commission examined it at some length and then asked the government to change the nomenclature to the Right to Information Bill, and the Commission also recommended that the preamble should be changed to provide for freedom to access information to a bill which provides for a system through which people can access their right provided by the Constitution. The Commission also recommended re-examination of the provisions contained in Section 8 against permissible restrictions and under Article 19. These have since been accepted, and now let us look at monitoring the implementation of international treaties. Under the Section 12 of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the Commission has the power or the responsibility to review international human rights conventions and make recommendations to the Government of India. And for instance, the Commission, as soon as the 2 protocols to the Convention on the Rights of Child were adopted, the Commission recommended that both optional protocol 1 and 2 dealing with child pornography, child prostitution, sale and trafficking of children and children in armed conflict be examined properly by the government and commended them for adoption by the Indian government. This recommendation has since been accepted, and additional protocols to Geneva Conventions 1949, the NHRC recommended to the Government of India to review and comment upon its stand on the 1977 additional protocols to the 4 Geneva Conventions dealing with human rights in times of armed conflict and protection of victims in such armed conflict. And this dialogue between the Commission and the Government of India is going on. And now here is an important convention, which is the Convention Against Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, Degrading Treatment or Punishment. In this case, the Commission asked the government to ratify this convention, and in response to NHRC's recommendation, the Government of India signed it in the year 1997. Of course, the ratification is yet to happen, and then the Government of India is currently in the process of drafting a domestic legislation to ratify this convention. And the NHRC said the government's failure or delay in ratification of this torture convention has affected our capacity to secure extradition of number of required criminals from abroad. The Commission also took up the convention relating to the status of refugees and the optional protocol thereon, and then the Commission recommended that there is a need for a comprehensive legislation which will deal with the situation of refugees. Now, let's turn our attention to the spreading of human rights, literacy, awareness, etc. Under Section 12H of the Protection of Human Rights Act, NHRC is required to conduct conferences, seminars, workshops, training, and use media for spreading human rights, literacy, and awareness. And in pursuance, NHRC has been organizing all these activities. It has also been imparting training on human rights to cross-section of civil servants. It has been organizing training of trainers programs, and it has been training on human rights issues relating to women, children, and then rights of the disabled, rights of the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, rights of detainees, and these trainings have their own value, and they have they can change the consciousness, they can change the mindsets. NHRC also has been trying to develop curriculum for education of human rights at school level and graduation level. As a result of its efforts, NCRT has developed a guidebook, and even at the higher education level, certain things have been developed and developed for teacher training as well. In fact, in the year 2012-13 annual report, the Commission reported that over 114 training programs, workshops, and seminars were conducted. These include, to give you a small sample or a flavor, like a conference on accountability and disaster addiction, and then there's a conference on right to food and workshop on bonded and child labor. In fact, these workshops on bonded child labor have been organized over the years to sensitize the authorities concerned in various states. And there's a conference on missing children to discuss the compliance with NHRC's earlier guidelines on this subject. NHRC submits from time to time annual reports to the government, and under the Section 1220 of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the government is required to place the NHRC's annual report before the Parliament along with an action taken report on the Commission's recommendations, and the government is also required to give reasons in case if it has not accepted any of the recommendations made by the Commission. Now let's turn our attention to research projects and programs initiated by the Commission. Under Section 12G of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the NHRC is required to undertake or promote research studies, and in fact, in pursuance of this statutory responsibility, the Commission has been conducting research studies either by itself or it has been commissioning various universities, non-governmental organizations, and other technical institutions, and through them it has been trying to conduct the research on human rights issues. And these research projects help in creating a network system in the country which facilitates protection and promotion of human rights. They also contribute to a culture of human rights. And now let me give you a list of some completed research studies by NHRC to enable you to appreciate the kind of issues that have been taken up under the research mandate. Like, for instance, role of civil administration in the protection of human rights in strife-torn areas of Jammu and Kashmir. And the second, underlying the causes of human rights violations as a result of insurgency in Northeast, the nature of state response, the use of special laws and violations by non-state actors, by state actors, and also practical recommendations, suggestions. In fact, this was conducted in the state of Tripura, and detailed recommendations were made for improvement in the situation. The third research study was on dependency on forests for livelihood and its impact on environment, and it was a case study of Baiga tribe of Mandla district in Madhya Pradesh. This has since been completed, and the fourth project is about the plight of mentally ill persons languishing in Chamatkari Hanumanji temple in Chindwara district of Madhya Pradesh, and this project has also been completed. Fifth, economic, social, cultural rights, a study to assess the promotion of economic, social, and cultural rights in India. This was entrusted to the National Center for Advocacy Studies in Pune, and then there is a research project on estimating precise costs and providing level playing field to persons with disabilities. There are, in addition to these completed research projects, there are a number of other projects of the Commission which are ongoing. These relate to a study on prevailing right to food situation among the below poverty line families in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, human rights of elderly persons, law, policies, and implementation, a study with special reference to Kerala. And then there is a research project on country assessment, national inquiry on human rights in the context of sexual and reproductive health care and well-being. The NHRC also has commissioned a study on human rights of transgender as a third gender. The project on the human rights issues related to right to education of children of migrant laborers in Kerala was given, interrogating violence against women. The other side, an exploratory study into the world of perpetrators. This project was also initiated, and then there is a national research study on human trafficking, which has been assigned to the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Work is underway under each of these research projects. And then let's turn our attention to the Commission's efforts in the case of relief and rehabilitation in the case of natural calamities. The NHRC has taken several initiatives for safeguarding situations. In case of natural disasters, some of them are given below. For instance, it ordered the state government of Y.S.R to review the public distribution system. It ordered, in the wake of a super cyclone, it monitored the relief provided by the state government, and so that the needs of the most vulnerable are not violated. The Commission ordered Orissa government to adopt relief measures for the victims of 2001 super cyclone, and the NHRC also took cognizance of the 2001 earthquake that affected the state of Gujarat. It monitored the relief measures that were taken by the government for the people who have been, affected by the tsunami that struck the southern states of India in the year 2004. Now, to sum up, in pursuance of the mandate provided by Section 12 of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the National Human Rights Commission has been undertaking a wide range of functions, which we have seen in the earlier part of the lecture, including redressal of individual complaints, intervention in court proceedings, review of laws, review of conditions in prisons, mental hospitals, review of international conventions and constitutional safeguards and laws, and spreading of human rights literacy and awareness, and encouraging the efforts of non-governmental organizations. So, in the last 23 years or so, the NHRC had been performing these functions with dedication, and some of the results are visible to everyone, and there is, of course, a lot more that needs to be done, and thank you.